Hello, hello. Mel here to do a sketchbook tour of sorts after a couple followers had requested it. I had put a poll out to see if anyone was interested, and I was almost hesitant to do so because of the recent conversation around sketchbooks and what makes a perfect sketchbook. Personally, I think sketchbooks are for learning and developing your ideas, as well as making pretty finished pieces, so there isn't really a single way to fill a sketchbook. Before we open it up, I will say my sketchbooks are more like Frankenbooks. I tend to tear out pages and rearrange them for projects or doodle on index cards, scraps, sticky notes, especially if I'm planning out a piece. We're gonna go and we're gonna open it up, and you're gonna find, first and foremost, I like to do sketches of a bunch of characters that I've created, especially when I'm in a funk and I need something familiar to go back to so I can get back into it. Other times I like to draw a line or a squiggle and see where I can go with that or what can be developed from it. If I'm on Pinterest or Instagram and I see some photography work that I really like, I try to take the pose from it and draw it out myself. My favorite thing to do are like dancers, fantasy photography. I think those are really, really pretty and really inspirational. Before we go a little bit further, I will say that there are mostly blank pages. And that's another theme that you're going to see in some of my sketchbooks because I like to do a lot of gesture drawings. That's one of the things I do for warming up. That's something I like to do as practice. And when you sit in a gesture session, you're going to get a bunch of 30-second gestures to do, which is literally, hey, you have 30 seconds. Draw a line, draw a basic shape. I also don't have a set arrangement of how I draw in my sketchbook, so a lot of these pages that haven't been torn out yet, they look like they're upside down or off to the side, and a lot of that's just because I just open my sketchbook and I just draw things. These were probably 1-minute gestures based on the fact that they have more fully fleshed out shapes. These are the 5-minute gestures of that session, the 10-minute piece. I think I really liked this pose a lot. This is where I started to develop the character design for Nyx, my Ore nymph character. I wanted her to have curly hair and flowy clothing, but I needed more practice on both, so I did a bunch of those for a bit. You can see I've got the practice with the textured hair. This is me trying to plan out what her outfit's gonna look like. So this is the first sketch I did of Nyx. And for a while, this had been used to understand the emotion for her design. When I draw her, what do I want people to feel when they see her? What is the impression I want people to get from her? And this sketch did a lot in hearing that. This is the planning sheet that I started doing for Nyx when I was redeveloping her design. So if we go back to, this is the first sketch that I did of her. Between this sketch and this planning page, there is a doodle board somewhere with a ton of different doodles of how I was going to draw her. She looks like she's prepared for a job to do and adventuring. She's a little more sure of herself here, not quite the ethereal floatiness that I was going for. I was starting to hash out some more details of how I wanted her clothing to lay on her and how different parts of it were going to go. Now we're in the part where I ripped out most of the pages, starting with a rogue notebook sheet for this sketch of 2 nymphs in our party, Nyx, the Ore nymph, and Impheria, the Dryad nymph. And this piece of notebook paper is what started this sketch that I have yet to develop of the two. I wanted something a little floaty, and there will be more planning done for this, and I'm sure I have doodles of that hiding around somewhere. This next section is a more organized look at pieces that I had planned and brought to completion. So here are those index cards that I had mentioned. This particular piece was for these cinderberries that I was doing, this fantasy fruit that my druid could find out in the wilderness. And I imagined her doing a sort of fields journal sort of thing where she found these berries or these reagents and then did a little sketch of them with notes. But I wanted to plan out how that was going to look. So I did a lot of planning. I looked at a bunch of different botanical illustrations. I also did a couple of color experimentations. This was a digital piece, but I like to start a lot of my work traditionally so that it flows a lot easier for me. Sometimes it feels nice to be able to just reach out and grab a couple of colored markers and just use the tools I have on hand rather than having to worry about switching between digital tools, digital colors, and too many options can be a little detrimental to my process. This was the planning of my Witch of Thistle piece, where you see Marjorie in the foreground of a burning village. And there were a lot of elements in here that I struggled with. I took the planning of this one particularly seriously because I had to start over. I literally had like my rough sketch on my phone, and I didn't like it, and I ended up deciding I was going to throw everything away and start over to see if I could do something a little better. So I broke it down a lot in this process of character design, how I wanted her to look. I fiddled with a value study of what a burning village with a subject in the foreground looked like. So I looked at a couple of fantasy illustrations of that. This is ultimately the sketch that I used. I had to get the anatomy right. Her head is a little too big here. That's something I did a lot early on, is that I drew heads way too big for their bodies. I redid this on a sticky note and I put them together in Photoshop so that I can just start working directly on the digital. But this is how the sketch looked. And this is a treat because this is the planning I did for Jordan's illustration of his character Samantha ripping out the heart of a mythical monster called a Lamia. He requested that everything stay under wraps so that I can show the finished piece. So this is a lot of the planning that I didn't show anywhere at the time. We've got my notes of what he wanted from me, and we've got the original base sketch of kind of how it was gonna look, how to make the snakes on her hair move and interact with the shape of her head, and I wanted to see the negative space around how that would look. The working sketch that I ended up uploading into Photoshop and revising as the process had gone on. And here we are nearing the end of this. So this is some stuff that I had done around March. This was my first paid commission. I got asked to do some emotes, and this was the work in progress bit that I had done for those. So what I had done is I just started developing the ideas for them until I had a more solid look. So I had completed these sketches, I cleaned them up a little bit digitally, and I was able to show the client and that they were happy with it. So that was my sketchbook tour for my 2019-2020 sketchbook, I guess is what I'm going to be calling this. I have another smaller sketchbook. We're not going to do a full tour of that now, but it's pretty much reminiscent of what I've already shown you. So all of my sketchbooks look like they have been through hell in some way, shape, or form, and they all look like they have random notes and jotted down incomplete ideas, planning pages, random sketches, lots of studies. 90% of the pages in any of my sketchbooks is mostly practice, is mostly figuring out what I want to do with the design, is mostly from a class that I had taken where I was taking art notes in or doing art studies in. And that's what I think makes a sketchbook. Is sketchbook should be like home. A sketchbook should feel safe for you to work in. You don't need to put it on social media. You don't need to show anybody anything of your process. You don't need to if you don't want to. I like to because I like hearing myself talk, and I like to think that people are very much interested in how many hours I spent drawing the other eye. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this was something that you enjoyed doing, and if you really liked it, let me know, and I can start looking at some of my other sketchbooks to do another sketchbook tour of. I hope you guys have a wonderful day wherever you are, and I hope to see you soon.